Right, we're now live, Chair.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this remote meeting of the Inner West Community Committee. My name is Councillor Hannah Bithell, and I will be chairing today's meeting. The Inner West Community Committee covers the Armley, Bramley and Stanningley and Kirkstall wards, and is a committee where ward members have an opportunity to discuss and make decisions about services and priorities for the local area, and also consider funding applications regarding local community projects and youth activities. I would like to start the meeting today by confirming that today's community committee meets the requirements of the council's constitution, even though members are in remote attendance, and that members of the public are able to view the meeting via live webcasting. As we begin the meeting, could I ask all attendees to mute their microphone unless I invite them to speak? This will avoid disruption from background noise. Appointment of the Vice Chair. In order to avoid any disruption to the meeting, should I lose internet connectivity, I propose we appoint a Vice Chair who could step in during my absence. I move Councillor Venner and invite another member to second that motion.
I will second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. I'll take a vote by assuming your silence as approval. And are there any objectors or abstentions? Okay, could I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves and mute your microphone, sorry, once you've introduced yourself. I'll start with Councillor Jim McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Councillor Jim McKenna, Armley Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Alice Smart.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Alice Smart, representing Armley Ward.
And Councillor Lou Cunningham.
Evening, everyone. Councillor Lou Cunningham, Armley Ward.
Councillor Caroline Gruen.
Evening, everybody. Councillor Caroline Gruen, representing Bramley and Stanningley Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Kevin Ritchie, also Bramley and Stanningley Ward.
Councillor Venner.
Hello, everyone. I'm Councillor Fiona Venner from Kirkstall Ward.
And Councillor Illingworth.
Hello, everybody. It's John Illingworth from Kirkstall Ward.
Thank you. The Inner West Community Committee also has co-opted members who represent each of the wards. Could I ask the following co-optees to introduce themselves? I'll start with Hazel.
Good evening, I'm Hazel Bootle and I'm the Armley co-optee.
Thank you. Steve Harris.
Steve Harris, I'm co-opted from Kirkstall Ward.
Steve Galvani.
Once I can find my mute control here, I'm Stephen Galvani. I'm also a co-optee from Kirkstall.
Steve McBarron.
Hello, everyone. Steve McBarron, co-optee, Bramley and Stanningley.
I believe that's all our that's all our co-optees. We also have two young people from the Inner West Youth Committee who are attending their first committee meeting today. Mercedes.
Good evening.
And Daisy. Daisy might be. Perfect, thank you. Could I now ask officers to introduce themselves? We'll start with Karen.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen McManus from the Communities team.
Thank you, Liz.
Evening everyone, Liz Jarman, Head of Stronger Communities from Leeds City Council.
Debbie.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Debbie Oldham. I'm from Governance Services and I'm clerk to the Community Committee.
Thank you, Finn.
I don't think we've got Finn on the call. I think it looks as though it might be Paul Foster.
Ah, yes. Paul then.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Paul Foster. I'm Transport Strategy Manager at the Council.
Thank you. Julie.
Good evening. I'm Julie Payton from the Safeguarding and Domestic Abuse team, Leeds City Council.
Thank you. John. Hindley.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Hello, everybody. My name's John Hindley. I'm a Public Health Officer for Leeds City Council for the West.
Thank you. And finally, I believe Elaine.
Hello, everybody. I'll just put my video on. I'm Thompson, and I'm Census Engagement Manager for Leeds North West for the Census West, and I've come here to talk to you whenever it's convenient.
Thank you. Is there anyone I've missed? If so, shout up now. Perfect. Okay, so moving to the agenda, could I ask the clerk to go through agenda items 1 to 5, please?
Thank you. So under agenda item 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Agenda item 2, there are no exempt items. Agenda item 3, there are no late items. However, there has been some supplementary information in relation to agenda item 9, which was the finance report, and that should have been circulated to all members. Is that correct?
I've had it.
Brilliant, thank you. Agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests? I'll take silence as there are none. Agenda item 5, apologies have been received from Donna Bell, who's the one of the co-opted members for Armley. And Councillor Hesselwood has also informed me that she will be joining the meeting a bit later due to work commitments. And that's it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 6, minutes from the previous meeting held on the 17th of November 2020. Do members accept these as a correct record? And I will again take silence as approval. Thank you. And do we have any matters arising from the minutes? Councillor Ritchie? Muted.
Unmute, yeah. It's a matter arising from the last matters arising, and Councillor McKenna talked about the presentation from Ms. O'Keefe, and we were told that we'd get an email to members. Now, whether that just went to Armley, I don't know, but I thought it might come to us all. I think because you were going to push it to the scrutiny board. I think events have moved on, but as soon as it's on the minutes.
Yeah, so I did it. I forgot, to be fair, that it was meant to be an email. I did it as a phone call to Councillor McKenna, but I'm happy to put the same thing in an email if you'd like a copy, Councillor Ritchie.
Yes, please.
Okay. Item 7 then, do we have any submissions for agenda item 7, the open forum?
No, we don't have any submissions this time, Councillor. Thank you.
And then agenda item 8, Inner West update report. Could I ask Karen to present, please?
Yeah, hi. If I can bring your attention then please to agenda item 8, which starts on page 15. I will assume this report as read, but there is just a couple of things I'd like to bring your attention to. And the first one is on paragraph 8, which is the link to the online youth summit survey. I know I have sent it out via an email, but just to remind you it's there, and just to share it if possible, if you can. And then if I can bring your attention to paragraph 35 on page 21 regarding Census Day. And I think Councillor Biffle would like to give a bit of an update on this with Elaine.
Yeah, so we've brought Elaine on, who is a census engagement officer, I believe.
Manager,
fancy. And if you just want to give us a bit of a fill-in for sort of 5 or 6 minutes, just to tell us how we can support our residents to make sure the census gets done.
Okay, well, we've been working very hard, working with all the different communities. That's part of our engagement. There are 3 census managers for Leeds. I'm North West Leeds. My colleagues have Leeds South, and that's Scott Martin, and Denise O'Connor has North East Leeds. As we know, the census is fast coming. It's on Sunday, March the 21st, and we've each been working with the communities in our area. Now, my area of North West Leeds has a great number of students in that region, and their engagement started a week before most of the other people because they were expected to go home for the Easter vacation. And also there was a tendency for the students being 18 to presume that their parents would fill it in on their behalf. And so there's been a lot of information sent out to them. They've had personal emails also to let them go on the census website for students and realise that they must fill in the census form for themselves if they're a resident normally in Leeds. So that was one of my big groups of people. The other group of people I have been dealing with and I am supporting in a big way are the elderly people who might not have digital skills. Now then, 10% of the country got paper questionnaires, not just the letters with the unique code on. We sent out paper questionnaires to those who we thought might need them as a priority. Other people can request a paper questionnaire. On the letter that they receive, there is from the contact centre a phone number, an 0800 phone number, and they can request a paper questionnaire if they prefer. If they would rather, a family member, a trusted friend, or a carer can phone up on their behalf. This is an automated service and it's available 24/7. And to make it easier, the option 1 is request a paper questionnaire. They have a 10-digit number on their census form and they key that in, and that's all they have to do. A census questionnaire would be posted to them. Because some of these call lines were very busy, they've also opened a dedicated helpline, and I sent that out in an email for you to have as information. And that is again 24/7 automated, and a census paper questionnaire can be sent out. If the people would rather speak to an advisor, on the phone contact centre number, they can choose option 3. This isn't 24/7, I have put time guidance down there, and it gives them the option to speak to an advisor, to ask for a paper questionnaire, but also to ask for a large print questionnaire if they would rather have a clearer, larger print copy available. They can also get help once they get the paper questionnaire. They can get help to complete it. If they start it off and they think, oh gosh, you know, I'm not quite sure about that question, they can have, again, a family member, a trusted friend, or a carer to help them complete. Digital completion was the main emphasis, but if you're an independent person just without digital skills or internet access, order your paper questionnaire and do it yourself. I mean, I wouldn't have family here to help me do the digital form if I didn't have digital skills, which I've got very few of, I must say, but I try my best. So there also is another option. They have, in our Northwest Leeds area, they have 3 census support centres. Now, to tell you the truth, 2 are in Leeds. One's Leeds Library, one's Swarthmore Centre, and one's the Armley Hub Centre. Swarthmore is the only centre that is doing face-to-face completion help. All 3 centres are doing telephone support. It's because of COVID restrictions. But these are all appointment based. So you ring up and your advisor or your telephone person doesn't say, right, crack on, where's your form? Let's start filling it in. They say, we're going to ring you back. When's it suitable for you? We'll ring you back. You can get settled at a good time and we'll go through it and complete it together. So that's the way that the completion centres are working. As I say, Swarthmore has sort of quite small individual rooms that they've set up in a very COVID safe way, and they will invite people in by appointment to fill in their census questionnaire if that's what they would prefer. And what else have I got to tell you? There's a text relay service to assist people who have hearing or speech impairments. I'm not so familiar with this, but it sounds like a really good idea. It says dial 18001 followed by the phone number. Then we've all possibly heard, well, I have because I've been working for the census, household field support officers will be coming out and about. They will not, because we're so concerned with safety of the elderly, we don't want any scams, we don't want anybody knocking on the doors and pretending to be somebody they are not. The household staff will have a distinctive purple and yellow vest. They'll have ID on a lanyard that says Census 2021. They are not allowed to cross the threshold. They will knock on the door. If somebody hasn't managed to fill in the census or maybe not got a census form, they will guide them and signpost them to help. They can even offer them a paper questionnaire there and then, link it to their house. And if that's what they choose to do, they can say to that person, and when would you like me to come back and collect it from you, because I will go and post it for you, because your post box might be a long way away and you might not be going out or comfortable with going out. So I will come back, I will pick it up and I will post it for you. So that's the help at the moment. Let me see. I did actually put a photograph of my husband, who is a census field officer, to show that the high-vis vest is not just your plain yellow vest that you can buy at any supermarket. It has census officer on, and it's quite distinctive. Nobody approaching anybody at the doorstep has been untrained. They are fully trained in COVID awareness, provided with sanitisers and masks. They will step back away from the door. They will offer signposting help, and they would never, in any circumstance, ask for any payment for that help and advice. This time, as was planned pre-COVID, there will be not any doorstep completion event taking place. These staff were provided with a tablet on the doorstep there and then, but not now. It's been decided, no, we're not doing that. We'll step back and we'll give you any help and advice that you need. Unless, if you've got other questions about other groups that are filling in the census form, I was focusing on the elderly because I know a lot of councillors in this area have a lot of elderly people, and they were worried about them being a little bit far-flung, isolated, or not with good digital skills or internet services. And that's the way I've been contacting community centres, churches, and sending out all sorts of guidance and leaflets on how you can help somebody fill in your census questionnaire. And I'm willing to send out anything I like.
Thank you very much, Elaine.
Was just more than 5 minutes? Sorry, I do go on a bit.
It's okay. Just for those watching, we know that the sound's not been particularly great quality there. Hopefully you managed to get the information. I guess the highlights were that if you need help, there's a real range of ways that you can access help. And if you get in touch with any of your councillors, we have that information Elaine was speaking about, and we can then provide that to you. There's also on your census documents, there is a list of places you can go for help as well. And then the other thing that was really key was the safeguarding element of making sure that when somebody comes to your door, you know that they're from the census. And so that you know they're from the census, they've got a really distinct purple and yellow high-vis with census written on the back. And again, if you've got any concerns about that, don't let people in. They will not be crossing the threshold, and they won't be filling in the forms on the doorstep with you. I think they're probably the two key messages, but hopefully you guys got those anyway. Councillor Smart, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks for that, Elaine. I've just got a couple of questions. You mentioned about this Sunday being Census Day. So presumably that's not the final deadline, is it? That's just kind of an awareness day.
That is the day that we're taking the snapshot and getting the idea of who's in your house on that particular day. Right. It can be complete until the 4th of May. Reminders will still come out after Census Day, but I do want to reassure, especially the elderly people, don't worry. If they have ordered a census paper questionnaire, it can take 5 working days to come. I'd say a week to be on the safe side. They might not even have it by census day, March 21st. It is perfectly fine to fill it in afterwards.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. That answers both of my questions. Thanks, Elaine.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie?
Yeah, thank you. And apologies, I had to switch the sound off because I'm struggling with misophonia and I couldn't bear listening to that crackle. So apologies. So if you've covered this, forgive me. And thanks, Councillor Bissell, for that summary, which wasn't included in that. So you sent some really helpful information yesterday for older people. I've circulated that to Bramley Elderly Action and to Lee Ingham, who covers owls, I think. So that should cover the Curtisall ward. But it might be something that if the Armley members haven't done, might do that as well, because they were appreciative of that information. So thanks for sending that.
Oh, you're welcome. And I have been in touch with them, and they've been very, very welcoming and appreciative of the help and very supportive. I have sent information out to them and also to food banks to sort of reach as many people as possible. Little postcards, leaflets, like that, just to get the word out. And we don't want anybody to be worried about this. You know, I was quite upset because he'd accidentally thrown the letter away. It didn't look like a census questionnaire to him. It's a small letter with a unique code number on, and he mistakenly thought it was something else and was quite anxious. And we're very keen to get another letter. We can get a census questionnaire. I've even had councillors contact me and pass on names of ladies who wanted that help, and the phone lines were a little bit busy, so I said I'll do it for them. I don't mind it being engaged. I can understand that they're getting anxious. I don't mind being put on hold. I'll get them the census questionnaire ordered for them. I can see that they're getting a bit worried and perhaps not hearing the different options too, which there's not a lot of options. I mean, I hate it when there's about 7 or 8 options, and by the time I've got to number 6, I've forgotten what the first few options were. So this is quite simple, but I'm offering that support for anybody. I don't want anybody to be anxious.
That's really good. It's good to know that we've got somebody that we can come to with any questions as ward councillors as well. Just while we're on census, it's worth noting as well that we've got the new LGBT plus questions in there. If anyone is watching this and is concerned about answering those questions or is not out to their family, if you just check out our social media, then there is information on there as to how you can request that your information is put in separately to that of your family, and lots more information about the census as well. Thank you, Elaine, so much for coming in and just doing that for us. It's really helpful to have
anything else after the meeting. Yeah, anything else that comes through, I'm happy to help. And anybody in a household can ask for an individual questionnaire if they're age 16 or over and complete it on their own and send it in. They can do this confidentially. They can get the unique code number, or if they ask for it in a letter format, it is not in a census envelope.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Karen, are you okay to come back in on your report, please?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the finance report now, which is agenda item number 9, and it starts on page 31. We'll move straight on to page 33, which is paragraph 18, which shows the remaining wellbeing budget of £60,000 and 875. Excuse me, sorry. And then table 1 shows a breakdown of all projects with remaining balances at the bottom of the table. These balances will be carried over into the next financial year. So Armley has £35,549.83. Bramley and Stanley have £1,787.47, and Kirkstall has £13,537.70. Moving on to paragraph 21, which is the start of the projects to be considered this evening. We'll raise your hand if you've got any questions. If you stay silent, I'll assume it's approved. I'm sorry, my kitten just jumped on me. And I'll move on to the next one.
Councillor Ritchie's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry.
I do apologise. It's back on agenda item 8. You jumped rather quickly. I just want to clarify the library, the hub opening hours, because on page 23, bullet point 46, you've got Tuesday 10 till 5 at Bramley. I believe that's a late night opening. So could you just check that? And
The Bramley opening times.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll check them. I mean, that's what we've had sent through. I'll check it.
Councillor Gruen might be able to confirm. I'm sure we had a late night on a Tuesday.
We did have a late night on a Tuesday, and when I looked at the information that came through to us, not as part of the community committee papers, but through to us for information directly, I thought the times did correlate and that it was late on Tuesday on that sheet. So I do hope it's an error, because we did have a late opening on Tuesday.
Right, I'm sure it is, but I will check it. Just make a note one.
Thank you.
Right, okay. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I did mean to ask if there was any other questions on that report before I moved on. I do apologise. Where was I? So, yeah, so we're looking at the projects to be considered now, starting at paragraph 21. All of these projects are for April 2021. So just to make you aware that they will be included in next year's figures, so coming from next year's budget. So the first one to consider is from Kirkstall Educational Cricket Club. This is for the Kirkstall ward only, and it's for a security upgrade project for £2,730 to provide CCTV, security lights and an alarm at the clubhouse. Okay, I'll take that as approved. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So if we don't speak, it's approved. That's fine.
Yeah, sorry, is that right? It was like, how long shall I wait before I move on? So the next one, which is paragraph 22, is from Art Camp UK, and this is again for the Kirkstall ward only. Art Camp are requesting £1,470 for their project Easter Extravaganza. Been dreading saying that word all day. In April for 14 places at their 2-week art camp, and it'll be 7 children each week for 3 days. And they've said that they'll create a bubble of 15 children to adhere to government guidance. Okay, approved. Thank you. Moving on to paragraph 23. This is for the Bramley and Stanley ward from the Cardigan Centre, and it's to continue with their project for the youth support worker at Leeds West Academy. They're requesting £4,066.40, which is a 50-50 split with the school for the total cost of the project. Okay, approved, thank you. Moving on to paragraph 24 for the Kirkstall ward again from the Cardigan Centre to continue with their project for the Spen Lane Youth Club, and they're requesting £9,032.10. And they've said that depending on guidance at the time, they'll run a combination of either face-to-face or the detached and online work that they've been doing. Yep, approved, thank you. And then the same again with paragraph 25, which is again to Kirkstall for the Woodbridges Youth Club, which is £8,146.60. Yep, approved, thank you. Okay, so moving on to paragraph 26. This is for Kirkstall again, from the Parks and Countryside for the Kirkstall planting that takes place, which is £550 for 2 plantings in June and October. But they have given you a second option if you would prefer to have 3 plants, March, June and September for £825. So just whichever one, the 2 or the 3, if you're approving it.
I'm pretty happy with just 2. I don't know how my colleagues feel.
Okay.
They do get a bit dead towards the end.
Do they? I don't even know anything about flowers.
Well, no, I don't. But Asram sometimes complains they're looking a bit sad. He tends them very lovingly. I I'd be inclined. I think 2 is fine, actually.
Yep, 2. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next one, which is paragraph 27 from the Air Rivers Trust, again for the Kirkstall ward, for the river clean-up close to Kirkstall Abbey at a cost of £2,456. Approved, thank you. And then if we can move on to the supplementary information that was sent out, this is for the Armley ward from Parks and Countryside for a new notice board at Armley Park for £1,650. Yeah, approved. Thank you. Okay, that's all of those. So we'll move on now to paragraph 28. Table 2 shows all the projects that have been funded from the COVID-19 wellbeing budget, of which £10,000 was set aside for each ward, except for Armley, who set aside £20,000. The total budgets remaining, Armley has £8,518.25. Bramley and Stanley have £4,705 and a penny, and Kirkstall has £1,298.12. And then paragraph 29 and table 3 is the payments made from the tier 3 grant, the one that was granted to spend by the end of March. Each ward got 10,000 and only Bramley has anything remaining, which is £345.86. So then moving on again to paragraph 37 on page 40.
Sorry to interrupt you, Karen. Is it too late to spend that money now?
The £345?
Yeah.
No, there's still time.
Still time, thank you.
So the Youth Activity Fund, there's a budget.
Sorry, Karen, can I just check? Does it not come under the PERDA rules?
This shouldn't.
That was the crux of my question, actually.
Yeah, no, this shouldn't.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've lost my trail of thought now. Where was it? Sorry, yep. So paragraph 37, page 40, the Youth Activity Fund has a balance remaining of £28,693.89. Again, that will carry over into the next financial year. Table 4 shows the projects that have gone out from that, with the remaining budgets per ward at the bottom, which will carry over for per ward as well. So Armley has £7,065.86. Bramley and Stanley has £6,862.42, and Kirkstall has £14,765.61. Paragraph 38 is the remaining balance in the small grants and skips budget, which is £531.31. And then table 5 and 6 shows the projects paid out of that budget, which was £6,000 that was set aside for that. And then paragraph 39 on page 42 shows your capital budget available as £8,928.84. And then again, table 7 is the projects that have been paid out from that in this financial year. And then finally, paragraph 40 is your available still budget, which is £87,723.84. And that's it from me on those.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Ritchie, you've got a question?
I have, yeah, thanks. Just on the underspend, because I realise members of the public and some of the exec board might be saying, well, why haven't you spent all your money? You always ask for more money, councillors. Yeah. I think we need to make it clear it's because a lot of the projects didn't go ahead and were returned.
Yeah.
And then just on the SIL amount, struggling, I haven't found the page. Has that taken out the Stanley allocation because of the 38k that were
yeah.
Is that so? That's what the new balance with that out. Yeah, I'm going to say because I've seen that on an exec board report has gone through.
Yeah, no, that's included. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. In which case, thank you, Karen. We'll move on to agenda item 10, dates and times report. Debbie, could you present this for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual report that comes to the Community Committee. And this time I would like to draw members' attention to paragraphs 8 and 9, which is on page 46 of the agenda. The committee agreed during this current municipal year to change the date of the meetings from Wednesdays to Tuesdays. It's proposed that from September, the meetings are actually changed back to the Wednesdays. And given that, the proposed dates are Tuesday, the 22nd of June, which will be the first meeting, and then it will be Wednesday, the 15th of September, Wednesday, the 17th of November, and Wednesday, the 16th of March 2022. It's proposed that all the meetings would commence at 6 p.m. Is that agreeable for all members?
Perfect.
Take silence, thank you.
Thank you very much. If we move down to agenda, did anyone have any questions on that before I move on? Perfect. Agenda item 11 then, domestic violence and abuse in Inner West Leeds. Can I ask Julie, please, to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. Is this to start with the presentation or the report as well? I've got the PowerPoint. That's what I had loaded.
Sorry, if you just bear with, have you got the report, the PowerPoint there, Julie?
I've got the PowerPoint. I didn't know, because I'm not familiar with Zoom, so I wasn't, but I've seen the share thing, so I was just going to give it a go.
Perfect. It's up.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So good evening, everyone. As I mentioned, my name's Julie Payton, and I'm a project officer based in the Safeguarding and Domestic Abuse team, which is part of Safer Leeds and Leeds City Council. So just before I start the session, I want to just acknowledge that there may be people in the audience who may have experienced abuse directly. They may have been exposed to or witnessed it in their own families, or been in close contact with someone who has been abused or been abusive. So just to sort of say, in preparation before we go through this PowerPoint presentation, if anything discussed today does raise any issues for you, either in relation to sort of your own situation or someone else's that you know, there is support available, and our commission service is Leeds Domestic Abuse Service, which is there on the slide with the contact details for the 24-hour helpline and the web address. So the aims of this session is I'm going to look at give you an overview of the reported domestic violence and abuse sort of in the Inner West Leeds area, and sort of comparison within the city, and a bit of key data around the impact of COVID-19 in relation to domestic violence and abuse. I'm going to discuss a little bit around the current activity that's occurring in Inner West to try address domestic violence and abuse. And then I'm going to provide a summary of the implications of the Domestic Abuse Bill and the upcoming changes to government's arrangements in Leeds. And at the end, if there is time to do so, I'd like to sort of open the discussion and explore the role that yourselves within the Community Committee could play in addressing domestic abuse in the Inner West area, and how I myself or the team could support you to do that. So just going to start looking at some data in Leeds. So just to make you aware, this is provisional data that's provided from West Yorkshire Police. It is rounded to the nearest 10 and it's yet to be finalised. And we found that data can change slightly for figures. That's the reason why, because sometimes how it's recorded changes at a later date. And that is the other keyword as well. It is recorded incidents. So please remember that domestic abuse is very much an underreported crime, and by its very nature, it doesn't tend to be a one-off incident. It's more usually a pattern of abuse. So when we look at these numbers here, it's likely to be the tip of the iceberg, really, in relation to the harm that's being done in homes across the city. I think the other thing to consider as well is that as our understanding around psychological abuse increases, especially when we think around coercive control, these kind of abusive behaviours are much more difficult to report and log as incidents. So, for example, would somebody report their partner for repeatedly checking their phone or maybe stopping them wearing a new outfit? Probably unlikely to report that to the police. But these kind of behaviours, this coercive control, really does underpin abusive relationships, and many victims have said it has a really profound impact on them. So when we look at the figures are a year's figures from January to December 2020, and this has increased slightly on the year before. The high volume wards have remained the same as the previous year, as mentioned there: Bermondsey, Toffs, Richmond Hill, Giptons, Hare Hills and Middleton Park. And around half of the domestic abuse incidents are repeat calls. As I've mentioned, this type of crime and abuse does often happen repeatedly. 30% of these are reported to have a child present in the home, and 10% are identified as what we call high-risk victims. So this is where people are at risk of serious harm. When we look down at the breakdown a bit further, 40% of reports are from white victims. However, 37% is not stated, and a further 16% is unknown, with Asian, Black and mixed at very low single figures of 3%, 2% and 1% respectively. So this information and data suggests that recording, disclosure and underreporting is affecting the numbers of people from ethnic minority communities that are affected by abuse. That's something that we are aware of. This table here gives you sort of an overview of the sort of last 3 years. So you can see the number of police reports from a city as a whole, and then individually for the 3 ward areas of Armley, Bramley and Stanley and Kirkstall. And as you can see there, in some wards they've increased slightly, in others they've decreased slightly. When we look at what the Front Door Safeguarding Hub and the Leeds MARAC, which is the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference, this is when the high-risk cases of abuse are discussed. And the reason for the MARAC meeting is to reduce the repeat victimisation that people are experiencing in abusive relationships. And cases that are discussed, it creates an immediate safety plan for victims and the families involved, and it helps to coordinate resources and ensures agencies are focused on the cases that are high risk. So the MARAC set of arrangements is to triage and prioritise safety for high risk cases of domestic violence and abuse, and it's made up of around 15 different partners that discuss them cases and build them safety plans. When you look at the number of cases there, the data is again from January to December 2020, and the MARAC cases have increased around 130 overall from the previous year. And as you can see there, repeats are around about 50%. When we look at the breakdown a little bit further, the females victims make up 91% of the cases and male victims 9%. As it is a very much gendered natured issue, and when we look at high risk cases of abuse, the vast majority of cases is female victims. And there you can see there's a very, very high number of children in the household. So just to make you clear on this particular statistic, this is children in the household, not necessarily children that witnessed them individual incidents that resulted in the referral to MARAC, but they are part of a household where somebody's either a victim or a perpetrator of abuse, but still a significant number of cases. So thinking a little bit about the impact of coronavirus and on reporting incidents of domestic violence and abuse, We've seen sort of over the last 12 months with the 3 kind of lockdowns and periods where it's eased, that when there's been instances of lockdown and people have been restricted staying at home, the number of calls for support has reduced slightly. And then as we've come out of lockdowns, we've seen them increase again. So we see people seeking more support as restrictions have lifted. And we've seen that up and down. It's not very sharp instances, but we do see that peaking and troughing. So there's lots of things that we've had to look at, and what we've found about is when refuge was full, we've had to look at other alternative approaches to provide accommodation for victims of abuse. So things that we've done sort of over the last 12 months is when our own refuge spaces are full, we've looked at alternatives, so working with partners across border in other areas for spaces, and also negotiating with families and friends to allow the family to stay with them as a temporary option until we can find a more suitable accommodation. We have used hotels as well during this period when we've needed to, but we've avoided that where there's been families and children involved. Other things we've done is using a scheme called Sanctuary, where we've used sort of extra locks and target hardening properties just to help keep victims safe in their properties, again, until alternative accommodation can be provided. We've also applied for funding and acquired additional housing, which is 7 housing association properties, which are now housing 12 people. And what's really good about this particular housing is that even after this particular funding has ended, because it is a housing association property, these victims can remain there permanently and will not need to be rehoused again in the future. Around thinking about sort of perpetrators, there has been limits when there's been time of lockdowns or social distancing, with social distancing, but the National Probation Service and West Yorkshire Community Rehabilitation Company have worked throughout this pandemic period, trying to maintain contact with the clients, and when sort of restrictions have eased, they've been able to move back to more face-to-face and group work support. Caring Dads, which is in conjunction with Children's Services, have also moved their groups online, so that period of support and can continue. And they've also launched a new service aimed at younger men, targeting their abusive behaviour. And I think the overall thing to think about is, because of the pandemic and the periods of lockdown and restrictions, victims of domestic abuse and the families are now spending much more time at home with their abuser, and they're much more isolated from the support of other people, which in turn just significantly increases their risk of harm. And when there is periods of lockdown, as we're in now, there's much less opportunity for professionals, services, or even friends or family just to pick up on them signs of abuse. So lots of hidden harm is significant at the moment. This table here is information where we've drilled down into a bit more data, and from April, which was just after the first kind of lockdown period, we started recording more details of information so we could ascertain the impact that COVID was having on victims. Again, some of the police information is provisional at the moment, but some of the key things to pull out of this table is looking at the number of contacts made to Leeds Domestic Violence Service. That's our commissioned service for all victims of domestic abuse, Leeds Housing Options, and the Children's Social Care contacts. So that number of Leeds Domestic Violence Service contacts That includes all forms of contact. So I'd already mentioned at the start of the presentation, there's 24-hour helpline. They can be contacted by email, and another form of contact they put in as response to COVID was having the web chat facility. So when victims were at home with their abusers and unable to talk without the fear of being overheard, there was the option to have direct contact via web chat, and that's still available at the moment. When we look at the children's social care figures, and that quite high number there, just shy of 5,000, it's just to know this is when the children's social care is when the domestic violence and abuse is the primary sort of contact or reason of concern. So in other cases, as you'll know, there might be other concerns, but there's also domestic abuse in the household. That's in addition to that as well. So just to make you aware of that. So thinking about sort of activity and some of the highlights that are taking, looking at addressing domestic violence and abuse. Well, there's some agencies that have been involved in the quality mark that have either achieved it or are working towards it. And the purpose of the domestic violence and abuse quality mark is to promote consistent and high quality service provision to women, children and men that are affected by domestic violence and abuse. And it's a way or a means to encourage agencies, employers and community organisations to make tackling domestic violence and abuse their business. There's a set of standards that are set out in this quality mark that are intended to build on good practice in delivering services in the public and third sectors. And these are informed by consultation with service users and practitioners, and we do review these on an annual basis. So if we think about some of the agencies involved with the quality mark, sort of in the Inner West area, Safer Leeds is one example. There's Leeds Federated Housing, community hubs, so Armley, for example, children's centres, Armley and Kirkstall, and then there's other sort of organisations that are sort of Leeds based that cover all kind of areas. So thinking of organisations such as Care and Repair and PAFRAS. But if you are aware of any other organisations within your wards that would like further information about the quality mark and work towards that, please pass on my details and I would discuss that with them and let them know what's involved. There's also support through GP practices. So for quite a few years now, we've been doing a rollout of routine inquiry across GP practices, and just over half of the practices in your ward have completed the training. And when we talk about routine inquiry, the routine inquiry model for Leeds is the 3AAA model, which is ask, action, acknowledge. And the routine inquiry is to routinely ask women who present alone to the GP or other health professional in that setting if they're experiencing domestic violence and abuse. We've also developed a quality mark for GP practices as well, which is slightly simplified to the other quality mark for other agencies and more targeted at primary care services. And again, we've had about five or six practices within your wards have completed the quality mark. So again, and I can provide details of that if you need that information. If there's any other GPs that you'd like to encourage to do that, again, if they contact me, I can certainly help them through that process. There are GPs that haven't completed the training in your ward and across the city have been offered the training again. But I do recognise that because of the pandemic and now pressures around the vaccines, they've had other priorities, but that offer will remain there if they want to take that up in the future. There's also early helps hubs as well, which have been established by Leeds City Council Children's Services with the aim to improve early support to families across a range of issues. including families where there's domestic violence and abuse. It's very locally based. It's a multi-agency team, and within that there's a domestic violence coordinator called Fahima. And if you wanted to link in with her for any kind of local training for anybody in organisations, she does do quite a bit of training in your area, so you could contact her, and again I can provide you with the full email details. Thinking wider across sort of what's going on with Leeds, there's a wide range of activity going on, but I'll talk through some of the key ones just so that you're aware of them. When we think about what's happened over the last 12 months with the pandemic, we've put a few things in place. One of the things is we set up a tactical group, which was with the basis to provide a strategic level way of monitoring contacts and demands on services, responding to trends, and really reviewing the weekly data and monitoring that from key partners so we could adjust our responses as needed. We also did a lot of raising awareness across the community. So a lot of that was done via our social media platforms, our purple helpline cards that were like the size of a credit card that we produce. We've made that to a digital format, so again that could be shared safely in different ways. We've produced domestic abuse posters with information about Leeds Domestic Violence Service and how to contact support. We did that in 12 different languages and posted them out to a range of businesses across Leeds to display in their windows. We've produced a leaflet for volunteers that were working in food hubs to encourage them to look out for any signs of people that may experience domestic violence and abuse and how they can then signpost them to additional services. And we also shared information across the faith sector. The MARAC meeting and other multi-agency meetings have just moved online and continued as they are, just so that they can manage that risk and build in safety plans. Our workforce development that our team offer, the training, we've again moved online but continued to do that. And part of that training has been teaching professionals and people working in agencies around the additional impacts that the pandemic's had and how victims are often more vulnerable and at more risk, and how they can support and identify victims in different ways. And one example of this is something we've produced around how to ask somebody safely if they're experiencing abuse over the telephone, which normally we would only ask somebody if they were alone and we could see that face to face. But obviously, as a lot of things have moved, telephone appointments, we've built sort of a flow chart to assist professionals and in how to do that if they're concerned somebody may be experiencing abuse or be at risk. And that format has been shared across the health sector and other agencies to adapt as needed. We've also supported the Safe Spaces scheme, which is a scheme that's taking place in Boots chemists, Superdrug chemists and Morrison's in our city that have chemists within them, where victims can just go up to the desk of the chemist and ask to use the consultation room, where they'll be taken without question. And once inside there, there's lots of information about national but also our local support services. So they've got a private space where they can ring and seek support, and then also a viable reason for a lot of victims to leave the house, especially during periods of restrictions and lockdowns. So for example, if they need to pick up a prescription or go get some shopping, much more likely to be able to leave the house to do that. And we've built information about the safe spaces across all our training, so again professionals can be sharing this with victims as word of mouth. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the new governance arrangements that are upcoming. So I'm sure you're all aware the Domestic Abuse Bill has been working through Parliament and the House of Lords and should be enacted very soon, next month, all being well. And there's a few governance arrangements that will come into play as part of this when this bill is enacted. But this bill will very much improve protection for victims and also accountability for perpetrators. So it's very much a positive step in the right direction for us protecting victims of abuse. So part of this is the Domestic Abuse Local Partnership Board. So that's part of the government's arrangements that had to be developed. So this is in place now. This board is led by Councillor Cooper, and that is alongside Chief Officer representation from a wide range of partners. And this is now a statutory partnership which will build on the progress that was already made in our city, firstly with the Breakthrough project a few years ago, and then more recently with the Domestic Violence Programme Board. But this partnership board will deliver the statutory duties that ensure a broad focus on issues that aren't covered in new duties. So there's a requirement to include the voice of victims and families on the board. So we're very much working with colleagues in the third sector to strengthen the role of the DV Forum and make sure we get that full engagement from victims and families. And local authorities will be required to follow this statutory guidance that's been developed by the government when exercising their functions. So this statutory guidance associate is supporting the bill, and us as a team will be assisting organisations to help them understand how they need to follow this guidance. There's got to be a needs assessment completed. So the local authority, through the Domestic Abuse Local Partnership Board, are required to assess the need for accommodation-based domestic abuse support for all victims in their area, including those that might require cross-border support. They need to develop and publish a strategy for the provision of this support to cover their locality and having regard to this needs assessment. In the need to give effect to this strategy, so that's through either commissioning or decommissioning decisions. And then finally, they need to monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of this strategy and report back to the central government. So there's a lot more accountability around this. Other statutory duties for us as a council is that local authorities need to give priority status to all victims of abuse who are homeless and eligible for assistance. So this change will mean that victims no longer need to prove they're vulnerable as a result of their abuse in order to access accommodation secured by the local authority. Also, it'll also require local authorities, if they are rehousing an existing lifetime social tenant or offering them, say, a sole tenancy, if they're splitting up from a partner or family member who's been abusive, they still need to grant a new lifetime tenancy, provided the reason for that reason for the rehoming is related or connected with the domestic abuse. And just some of the key changes just to make you aware of. The first stature of the new domestic abuse bill is the statutory definition actually of domestic abuse is going to be broadened, and it'll really emphasise that domestic abuse is not just physical, but it includes emotional abuse, coercive controlling behaviour, and even economic abuse. It's established in law of office that the Domestic Abuse Commissioner must be appointed and sets out the Commissioner's functions and powers. Another real key one here is that the bill will recognise, the law will recognise the harm caused to children and view them as victims in their own right. So that's a big change, and not simply as witnesses to others' abuse. They will be victims in their own right. It'll also create a statutory presumption that victims of domestic abuse are eligible for special measures in criminal courts, civil and family courts. And it'll also prohibit perpetrators of abuse from cross-examining their victims in person in the civil and family courts, and that's in England and Wales. And I think at this point, what would be good if there's time is to think about if there's anything you want to discuss about your role, about how we can support victims further around seeking support for domestic violence and abuse, or introducing some of the new arrangements. So things like, for example, if we're looking at partnership works that are already in place in the community committee in your ward areas, could they be linked in somehow? Whether it be linking in with local care partnerships, for example, encouraging organisations to complete the QM or GPs, or just overall raising awareness, or thinking about things like, could we look at introducing community ambassadors, such as thinking about hairdressers, people in newsagents and things, and again, could that maybe be linked in with Fahima in the Inner West team, the domestic violence coordinator? So they're just some of the kind of ideas. But yeah, I don't know if anybody's got any questions or suggestions, or it might be something you want to think about and discuss.
I think there's probably an awful lot to be said on this, and I know we're short on time, so I wonder if members actually would like to do this and a discussion around this at another time, maybe as one of the community committee workshops, if there is work that we want to look to do together rather than right now. I've got 3 members with questions. If you can keep them brief, folks, please. Councillor Venner.
Thank you. I just had a couple of comments, actually. It's really significant. Sorry, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm the Cabinet Member for Children and Families and Adult Social Care. It's really, really significant that the bill recognises children as victims in their own right. It's a really significant reason in terms of why children get brought into care. Like the majority of children that are in our care system have been in households where there's been domestic violence or abuse. I was part of a national campaign to get babies included, because babies, including babies in the womb, was a bit of a gap. So there was a national campaign around that when it was at the Lord's stage. And Jasvinder Sanghera, who's the Independent Safeguarding Children's Chair, recently met with elected members to talk about the children aspect of this and what that means and what we need to do. There's been absolutely been increased presentations to children's social work over the last year around domestic abuse. So this is an area that the Children's Safeguarding Board, the Adult Safeguarding Board and Safer Leeds work on together. And another thing that's really significant is the requirement that's now a statutory requirement around councils providing housing to victims, but the funding for this, it's not clear where the funding for that will come from after 2023. It comes with funding till 2023. So I just wanted to make those quick comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Venner. Councillor Cunningham. Again, if we can be brief.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Julie. Julie, my question is again relating to children and young adults. I just wonder in Leeds whether we collect any information as to whether the children or young adults are actually the reporters of the domestic violence crime. Just thought that would be a useful point for us as well. Thank you.
Honest answer is I'm not sure, but I can certainly find out if any figures are collated by our intelligence team about the age of person reporting. I could certainly look into that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just make a quick comment. Thanks a lot for your report, Julie. That was really interesting. Some of you will know that I work at Leeds Women's Aid in my day job, so I'm quite familiar with a lot of these services. But something I just wanted to draw your attention to was the Leeds Women's Aid's online live chat service. This was developed during lockdown as an alternative to the helpline. So we found that lots of women didn't feel safe making phone calls when they were at home with their abuser. But there's now an online service where they can chat online with a support worker and get help and support that way. So, I think if we're doing any promotions of services available, it'd be good to include that as well.
Yeah, that's good. It sounded like that was also being done similarly by the council, or by the council's commission services. It's good to see that learning's being shared across. Councillor Ritchie, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks again, Julie, as well for the presentation. Just a question, you'll recall that you were very helpful working, I suppose, with me by giving you the intelligence about a surgery that wasn't using the routine inquiry. So I just wondered, I'm not going to name the surgery, but if you were able to use that experience to try and promote the scheme more. I mean, essentially, I think the email from the council got lost in the bureaucracy or the volume of emails, didn't it? But you were able to deliver that service. I'm just wondering if you could use that to expand that across some of the other surgeries. Thank you.
Yeah, I know which surgery that you're referring to, and yes, they did complete the training and they have achieved the quality mark. So that targeted one is certainly one that we also do as well. But yeah, thank you.
Lovely, and Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Julie, for bringing this before us. My question really is probably to you, Hannah. As you know, Armley has the highest numbers. I accept that one in any area is disgraceful and we ought to be doing something about it. You remember that it was me who raised this issue from a PAC report in the summer, and I felt it was something that should be taken to the community committee to see if we can come up with any solutions on any way forward. That dovetails nicely, Hannah, with your suggestion of having a workshop, and I think it's too important just to deal with it here tonight. Time is the essence, but this really does need a workshop on its own. Having heard our annual reports, our latest financial reports, we do seem to have a fair bit of money. I don't think money can resolve this matter, but I think there are things we could be doing, and maybe a workshop we could tease out some of these ideas. So I'd like to support that suggestion from you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. I will meet with Karen and look at hashing out some dates to work on that. I think it's a really wise idea. Julie, just one point from me. In the report, you mentioned that it was available to men, women and children. I anticipate there's no limitations. Non-binary people can also make use of the services, right? They're not particularly
Sorry, yes, I should have made that clear. Absolutely, yeah.
That's okay, I'm just checking.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions from members, Julie. So thank you so much for coming to present that. And I'm going to very swiftly move on, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you. Agenda item 12 then is the draft Connecting Leeds Transport Strategy. And if I can ask Paul to present that. Just before we do, to our young committee members, feel free at any point when questions are coming into your mind to put your little raised hand up. If there's anything you'd like to say, you're more than welcome to contribute. Paul? It is Paul Foster down to do this one, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Paul, can you hear us?
We may have lost him.
He was there a minute ago.
Oh, I can see he's joining again. He must have had some connection issues.
All right.
Sorry, Chair. I closed something else I was doing down and accidentally closed this meeting down as well. Sorry.
Offended.
Okay, well, that's a good start, isn't it? Wait patiently and then make a mistake at the start. I've got a brief presentation, Chair. Conscious of time, I'll go through that relatively quickly. And there are obviously the papers in the pack that were included for members to read a bit more about the strategy in terms of the executive summary. So the transport strategy went to executive board in December to allow members to approve the draft strategy, and I think members here probably saw it prior to that at Labour Group as well. It's now out to consultation till the 11th of April, and what we really want to do is make sure that everyone in Leeds gets an opportunity to make their comments on the strategy, to ensure that the strategy that we deliver is one that is right for Leeds and all the people who live here. I think something that really need to make sure we do say at the start of this presentation is that the council can't deliver this all on its own. We do need help from central government in terms of powers and funding and policy support. We need to work with our partner district councils and the combined authority at a West Yorkshire level. We need businesses in the city to respond to the strategy as well and help us. And most importantly, we do need the people of Leeds to buy into this and help us deliver the strategy that we've got. So we've set a vision of a city where you don't need a car, and that's very much about making sure that everyone has an affordable zero carbon choice in how they travel. This is, and I really want to stress, if you like, the everyone and every journey about this. It's very much a case that people need to be able to do all their journeys that they need to do, access all of the things that they need, whether that's employment, education, leisure, or healthcare opportunities across the city. And we want a system that allows all to be able to do that in terms of the people in the city. It's very much based on sort of our three objectives around climate change. Transport is a third of all carbon emissions in the city, and so we really need to help tackle that if we're going to achieve our climate emergency declaration target of being carbon neutral by 2030. It needs to help deliver inclusive growth. So as I've talked about, making sure that everyone has access to those opportunities across the city, but also in terms of making sure that if we have a more efficient transport system, we should be able to reduce the cost of transport on every individual. So reduce the cost for people, make that much more inclusive and help everyone. Improving health and well-being. Obviously, walking and cycling has a really positive effect on our mental and physical health, and building that into our daily lives as part of our transport, travel is really important. But also we need to reduce the negative impact of transport on our health in terms of air pollution and road danger. We set ourselves some very ambitious targets in terms of getting a shift from the private motor car, especially those powered by the internal combustion engine, to public transport, walking and cycling as well. We've set ourselves a target within this of Vision Zero, which is where we want 0 people to be killed or seriously injured on our roads by 2040. This is really challenging. If you think in 2019 there were 350 in Leeds, and this really is something that we've got to focus on. It is possible. There are other places in the world who have achieved this. Oslo in Norway is an example of that, and many other cities are starting to adopt this Vision Zero approach, which working with partners, the police, to work on enforcement, education, and changing the road environment to be safer for everyone. I guess really the climate emergency has really changed the focus of transport planning in the last few years, in that doing the things that we've previously been doing, you'd probably only get about a 17% reduction. If we look at the things we've included in this strategy, we really get that help and funding from central government. We deliver on the big moves that are set out in the strategy. We probably get about another 43% reduction. So we've still got a huge gap to meet that target. So what we're consulting on as part of this strategy and welcome members' views on are what are the additional measures that we may need to consider to actually help us reach that net zero target. And we've included suggestions like the workplace parking levy, a low carbon zone, which would bring both of which would help change people's behaviours with financial incentives, utilising that funding then to maybe fund public transport differently, put more of our public money into that to get people a better range of travel and prices in terms of that, and look at what we can do to encourage more shared ownership models so we don't need as many vehicles in the fleet. The strategy's got 6 big moves, and that's where our theme areas, if you like, that we're focusing on. They are very much set out in the executive summary with a bit more detail. I think for this area, I really wanted to focus on the creating healthy street space and communities and the enhancing public transport elements of this. So maybe just a little bit of detail on them. In terms of healthy spaces and streets, this is very much working at the real heart of the community level, looking at people's residential streets, the areas they live, the district centres where they visit, and supporting those and making sure that the streets work for everyone, for people to walk, cycle, use wheelchairs, mobility scooters, etc., and feel safe travelling in those areas. So we've really got to work on that, reduce the dominance of the motor vehicle, especially those that travelling through the area for purposes not necessarily within the area. In terms of public transport, I think I haven't been to an area committee, a community committee, where public transport and the state of the bus services is not being raised. And this is so, in this strategy, we're setting out ways to work with the combined authorities and the bus operators to get ourselves into a situation where we've got a virtuous circle with this, rather than a gradual decline that we currently have. We need to reduce the delays to buses. We need to maybe increase the therefore that'll allow the bus operators to increase the frequencies. We need to run them longer at other times of the day rather than just through the core times of the day. And we need to look at how we can get the cost of that travel down as well. And we're only going to do that by investing in those services. You know, the buses cost an amount to run, and then there's work being done with combined authority to look at an enhanced partnership model, so that when we as the highway authority invest in things like bus lanes and infrastructure to support the buses, we get an in-kind contribution from the bus operators, such as new vehicles, or, as I've said, running those extra frequency services, or other times of day, having enough capacity to serve areas where sometimes the buses are full. I hope we've listened, and the things in the strategy chime with things that we were told when we did our transport conversation in 2016. The things that came out from over 12,000 responses across the city. We looked at the Inner West feedback again, just to see that we have covered a lot of these. As I've mentioned, public transport being too high, punctuality, the role of 20-mile-an-hour zones, and I hope we've been delivering many more of them probably since 2016 already, but we'll continue to do that through the strategy. Behavioural change and addressing those short journeys, and I think again that's very much about those investments at the local level, and we've made a real case within the strategy stating that that's really important, that we get increased funding for those sorts of measures. Too often the funding that we get from government is earmarked for the larger 5, 10, 20 million pound projects, and yet a lot of smaller interventions at a local level could equally give us, or even maybe more so, give us better benefits. making sure it's important for everyone, and I hope that really runs through everything we do as a service and within the strategy. I mentioned rat running, and clearly we understand those issues in a West, and we need to look to address them through schemes we bring forward and the strategies that support them. And I think that active travel bit is again, it's been the emphasis of a lot of our work recently, and we're going to continue with that. I just wanted to, my colleague Finn Campbell went to the Inner West Youth Community Committee, and I hope I've captured the feedback from that. There's some really good energy and some fantastic ideas in there around how we can get people to travel more sustainably. Raising the price of parking, which is something, a workplace parking levy is effectively doing that. We don't have a huge amount of council run parking, a lot on the street, but the private car parks in the city centre, but we can start to influence some of that. And then promoting buses, and I think we all want to make sure that buses are going to be part of that solution going forward. They have to be, and we've got to make them better, making the streets safer and the road safety. So again, I think the Vision Zero and that change in emphasis hopefully starts to deliver some of that. And interesting to hear, I don't know whether the members who are here today would give us some more
to ask a question, so
detail on that. I've just got one more on how you can join, and then I can take questions if you want. The website has all the documents that are there. There's consultation, and hopefully the way we're doing this, people can look at what other people have contributed so far as well. So it's quite interesting. It's more of a conversational way of doing consultation. So it's not just you fill in a survey and it comes back to the council and we analyse it, and then it sort of goes into a bit of a black hole. We tell people what the conclusions were, but with that you can see what other people's views are, and I think that's quite useful. As I said, the consultation's live till Sunday, the 11th of April, and we've been doing some webinars, which the final one is next week. But on each of the big moves, there's been some question and answer sessions with panel members. So again, the link's on the website. If you feel interested in one of those particular areas, you can have a look at those. I think when taking questions, I would like to understand how much members agree with the vision and objectives. Are there anything we've omitted from the draft strategy to make sure we get them in the final strategy? And as we move forward and look at developing schemes and delivering an action plan, what are the priorities that Inner West needs to be included in this?
Lovely, thank you, and thank you for including the information from the youth committee as well. I'm going to give questions to this 6 minutes, so I'm going to be quite tight with these. Councillor McKenna, you were first, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things I'm particularly interested is in opening up railway stations. Armley has possibly three old stations that could be opened up. We're the only ward in the inner area that doesn't have a rail halt. Kirksall probably has two, Bramley has one, but we have three possibilities, and I'd like to see this being very much part of the plan. I know from my own experience that the bus is the people mover, but closely second is railway and railway halts. Grandiose schemes for putting in super trams costing many hundreds of millions. Just with a small outlay, you could open one on Canal Road. It has been a former station. It's just a matter of reopening. You could do one in Armley, and you could do one in Widder Lane at Kirksall Bridge. And these would have benefits to all the wards. So to me, this would be well worth the effort and the money being spent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. Councillor Illingworth?
Yes, Chair. Well, music to my ears. I'm absolutely thrilled to bits to hear Jim say that, because I felt for years that there was scope to improve the rail service, suburban rail service in Leeds, and it was a good way forward, something we could do now. And I absolutely concur with him. We've built the bloody station in the wrong place in Kirk, so we should have put it at Wither Lane, where it's just a natural place and where it used to be, and it's a natural catchment. But there are other possibilities. There's a possible alignment which takes a branch line off the Harrogate line and plonks it at Lawnswood. Very easy to do because the space is there, and you intercept the A660 traffic. And you could get it into trains at a crucial point outside the ring road. So I can see a lot of opportunities. I'd like to see a station, a rail halt in Hawks's Estate, for example, where there's another good place which we have looked at about 20 years ago, and then I lost interest for the sake of the ring road scheme. You can do both. And looking at how much gap there is between railway stations in London, for example, on suburban rail and suburban tube lines, they're much closer together than ours, and presumably the technology exists to stop trains and start trains in the right amount of space. But anyway, I would like to concur with what Jim's just said and push it as far as we can go, because I think it would be excellent and have a massive improvement on the service we offer the public. But one thing which I actually had my hand up for, and I'm going to be very brief on this, but I want to say it, we need to update our economic model. We're working with a model for the economy and an understanding of the economy, which really belongs in the 19th century. It's ridiculously out of date. We're starving parts of the council of money, and we know how desperate things are for money. There's no need for this. It's a self-inflicted wound, and we need to have some real political rethink of cash flows in the economy, the way in which we do workforce planning, the way we do training and education, to get those right, rather than simply taking a deck of cards which could be dealt in a different way. And we create difficulties for ourselves in providing satisfying lives for people and satisfying work for people, because we don't actually do the job. We're living, as I say, in the 19th century.
Thank you for that, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of quick things. Reducing the need to travel, there's reference to having good quality local amenities. So I think about our parks, and we need a different way of investing in our parks, because we rely on Section 106 or planning gain to do that. Areas don't have development, they don't get any money. Consequently, people need to travel, say, to Horsforth, where they've got a beautiful park, or to Pudsey, where they've got about 4 beautiful parks, they're under construction, and some areas haven't got many or poor quality. Secondly, I think there's a lack of reference to disabled people. I was pleased that the young people picked up on it. Other than a reference to the street charter work that's going on, there's definitely concerns within the disabled community that there's not enough reference, and the fear that the talk of stopping cars going into the city centre will disproportionately affect those, and I think there should be more focus around disabled parking in there and the commitment to that, which I know we have. And then finally, just on some of the language, and it's something I've brought up around planning, we use accessibility as an interchangeable term. There's 2 definitions really. There's transport planning, accessibility, about referring to the measure of reaching different destinations. But then there's the inclusivity side of accessibility around people with a disability, not being disadvantaged, getting around. So we need to make those clear. So I suggest accessibility dash connectivity for the transport, and accessibility inclusivity. And that needs to be clear. And I know my colleagues and planning chairs have heard me say that, and we've tried to change the draft reports in planning to reflect that. It also needs to happen in transport for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Gruen?
Thank you. I have made this point before, but it's a good opportunity to make it again. You do mention radial routes in the papers that we've got in our pack, but you mention them in relation to park and ride, the implication being that you have to drive part of the way, park your car, and use public transport the rest of the way. And that might be part of the way or even most of the way in a car before you start. So I agree with all of the principles and all of the objectives and all of the aims of the project, absolutely. But with regard to Leeds being a city where you don't need a car, you know, and I share that ambition, absolutely, you would have to address the radial routes in terms of public transport. So if you can avoid going into the city centre and then out of the city centre again, you'll shorten those journeys and make them more reasonable. At the moment, my personal circumstances are such that it would take me at least 4 times as long by public transport to get from where I live to where I work. I'm sure a lot of other people are in that situation. So how are you going to make Leeds a place where you don't need a car for somebody who has to do a fairly convoluted journey? And there are cities who I feel you don't need a car in, and they are generally served by some kind of rail or tram system that does provide an opportunity to get around the city as well as across it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Paul, for coming to present that to us. Hopefully those comments from members have been useful. Is there anything you'd like to very swiftly come back on? Really swiftly.
Yeah, I think, well, rail stations isn't a quick one to answer. I absolutely agree with the sentiment around that. I think it's really difficult because rail has a capacity as well, and there's a balance between the function for long distance connectivity and local connectivity. What we would ideally have is 4-track railways, so you could have stopping services and express services in the same place. We don't necessarily have that, so it does make it more challenging, but accept the point, and we'll put that feedback in. Thanks, Councillor Ritchie, and I know that at the AUAG those issues were discussed at greater length, so I think Finn and I have taken that on board, and will ensure that the wording and the elements around disability will be strengthened within the final strategy, because I do think it's what we do. We maybe just haven't quite articulated it well enough in the strategy. And I think, Councillor Gruen, I absolutely agree with you. Park and ride's very much one element of something that allows you to maybe for us to intercept some of those long distance trips that are coming from other areas into Leeds. So rather than then continuing their journey through places like in a West, they're intercepted, they get into public transport and come out. So it's a sort of a solution for some of those rural areas and neighbouring locations as people are travelling in from there. And we do need a mass transit system. It's one of the things that we've set out with the combined authority, who are also consulting on that vision at the same time, to deliver that. Obviously, it takes time, it takes a huge amount of resource to do that, and we've got to work with our bus networks as well to try and get some of those orbital connector services, some more agile services that pick people up where they want to go, take them to those origins and destinations that are not just in the city centre. So I think we've got some ideas for how we can start to deliver that. There's some trials of that system about to be, I think, in September in East Leeds, and hopefully we can make a success of that and roll it out across the city, because I think that will be a game changer in what public transport can do. It's sort of a cheap version of private hire that you have to share, run by the public transport authority. You know, I think that'll make a big difference to a lot of journeys, and really a big step towards people not needing a car for some of those short journeys that otherwise would take far too long on public transport as it is now.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for coming and speaking to us this evening.
Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We've got 15 minutes of the meeting left. If we move on to agenda item 13, which is the Inner West COVID-19 cases, and I've got John, I believe, to speak on this. John, are you on the call?
He's just sent a message, an email. He's having connection problems. He's trying to reconnect.
In which case, Karen, or Debbie, could you take the slides down and we'll quickly do any other business? Because I know we've got a couple of bits just while we wait for him to reconnect. It's worth Councillor Hesselwood, do you want to come in? I know you wanted to mention the time capsule.
Okay, yeah, thank you everyone. I'm just working on the COVID time capsule and doing some research at the moment for the Inner West and like all 3 wards. And we're looking to involve a variety of groups in each ward, including all the schools, as well as organisations, like Bramley Elderly Action. So any organisations, that help the elderly in our wards, as well as groups such as, in Bramley, for example, as Bramley Baths. And what we want to do is find out about people's experiences during lockdown, during COVID. So these can be added into a time capsule and then buried, 1 for each ward. So I'm just looking into at the moment the kind of things to include in that and the kind of things that we can get children to do in schools. I have found one activity booklet, but if we got every child in every school to do that, I think we'd be digging up a park, or we'd be accused of landfill if we did that. So we need to think of a way of how we can do this and how schools can maybe do something of their own, as well as contribute overall to what we're doing for each ward. So I'm looking at what to include at the moment. So I have written out to the 3 wards to ask you to send me the details and email addresses of organisations who you think should be included. History societies. I've had a brief conversation with Bramley History Society, for example, who are very keen to be involved in this. And I've also looked at the price of a time capsule. Now, the small ones that you would bury in your garden, for example, are about £30. So we'd obviously want something a bit bigger than that. So, but I can't see it being more than £100 per ward for a large size metal box that would lock, that we could put everything in. So it's not an expensive project to do. And obviously, once we have got all the groups involved, we would ask them for their, consult with the groups on the best place to bury the time capsule for future generations to look at as well. But I think it's really important that we get a real spread across the wards of groups involved. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm just researching, because some other councils have done this. So I'm just researching what other councils have done, who they've included, what they've included, so that we can pull a document together for the Inner West, so we know what we're doing, and also the actual box to put that in. So I have written out to members. So please, if you have any feedback, can you drop me a line on anything to do with the time capsule at all? As I say, this is just a starting point. I'm just doing some research, and this certainly isn't a definitive list. I'm just getting a document together as a starting point. So any feedback that you'd like to give me for the time capsules would be most greatly welcomed. And myself and Councillor Bithell will get a document out to you very soon with what we're aiming to do, and then we can get that moving in each ward then, and get a time capsule delivered, a COVID time capsule delivered for each of our wards for future generations, so they know what happened, what we lived through, the PPE we wore, those kind of things, how we conducted meetings, how everything changed literally overnight, and hopefully that will be interesting for future generations. So any feedback or anything you want us to include, please let me know.
Perfect, thank you. I will very quickly shamelessly plug the uniform exchange, and people need to go to innerwestuniformexchange.com. I should have checked that. I'll put it out on the socials. For any uniform that they want, it's all free. And more importantly, if there's any volunteers that would like to go ahead and do the sorting of uniform with us, we'd also be very grateful for that. Before I move on to John, is there anything else that anyone else would like to bring up in any other business? In which case, John, it will be down to you to play us out.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for that. I lost connectivity. I'll be as quick as I can. That's great. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Fantastic. Great. Yep. Okay, I'll just turn my camera off if that's okay. It just helps me with my connectivity. Okay, thank you very much for the invite. So we're going to briefly talk about the situation with COVID-19 in all of the wards. So if I could just have the next slide, please. So the information has come from Leeds Public Health, officers. And the next slide, please. So the citywide position, I won't read all of this out, but we continue to see a downwards trend, although the rate of reduction in infection is slowing. Sadly, the tragic milestone of 1,500 COVID-related deaths has been reached, and obviously our thoughts and hearts go out to the families of these citizens. What I would like to just highlight is that there is a 24% reduction in the overall infection rates in the last 7 days, and obviously the ward ranges are dynamic. So half of the wards are over 100 infection rate per 100,000 and about half are under, and it is a dynamic and ever-changing situation. But the incident management group, which consists of public health officers, clinical staff and a wide range of partners, continue to identify wards that require additional intervention and concentration. So next slide, please. So I won't go through this. The only one I wanted to mention, which we're going to come to a little bit later, is that some of the ward infection rates have been impacted, Armley in this case, and Wetherby, which obviously we're not concerned with at this meeting, have been severely impacted by the high infection rates at HMP Leeds, HMP Armley. So it's been well managed, but it does have an impact when you look at the ward rates. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But systematic whole prison testing for Armley is taking place. And this will be reflected in our overall case rates as the weeks and months move on. So next slide, please. And the next slide. Hello? Sorry, I think everything's frozen on my screen.
I'm going to say I'm actually moving on the screens. Can you not
Severe.
see it, John?
Sincere apologies. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, John. Can you hear us?
Hello?
Chair, I don't think
I think probably not.
Yeah, I can now.
Oh, we can now.
Can you just move back to the Army data slide? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello, John. I've moved it back to the Armley data slide. I think he's lost us again, Chair.
Oh,
Okay.
great. Can you move it to the... Can you hear me?
Yes, we
John,
can.
do you mind?
I'll carry on talking. It's just my screen's just frozen. I'm so sorry. I'm having real connectivity problems.
John, can we ask?
So for the Army, yeah.
John, can you hear me? John,
Chair, do you want me to send him a message? See if he got
yeah.
his.
It would be ideal, Karen, if we could just ask him to record this tomorrow and just send us a link rather than, and we'll email questions, because this clearly isn't working. And
Yeah,
that's fair. It can, in fact,
I'm so sorry,
I
Chair.
hope you make a note of this for the COVID time capsule. This is the sort of thing that needs to go in.
I'll stop sharing, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. If members could just take a look at that when the links come through, and we will also send it out to the co-optees as well. I was going to say, is there any questions, but I anticipate not. So in which case, we've already done any other business. Could the web